Good afternoon,
Appreciate
everyone.
it.
Welcome. Happy New Year. It's a pleasure to have you with us here today. I think we've got a really exciting topic. I know that as an industry, we've been very hyper-focused and rightfully so in many cases on the vehicle itself and making sure that we get the technology right, understand the consumer interaction, understand the driver trust. But today we're going to expand that conversation and really look at what is the impact of automation going to be beyond the vehicle itself. So let me give you a brief introduction of our panelists that we have here with us today. I will introduce them as they come up to speak as well. So first up, we have Rebecca Liebert. So Rebecca is from PPG. We also have with us Dr. Sheila Cotton. So she's here from Michigan State. We have Israel Duanis, and he's here from Autonomy. And then last but not least is Ray Tang, and he's here from Zhongmu. So with that, I'm just going to give you a brief introduction of the topic. Each of the panelists are going to give you a presentation as well, and then we will go through some questions and have time for audience questions and answers also. So one of the elements that is becoming more and more evident to me as we talk about automation is really to set ourselves up for success. We have to look at the sum of the parts of everything regarding mobility, right? This isn't just the technology and the execution of the technology itself. This is not just about consumer trust. This is not just about the infrastructure. This is not just about liability. This is about how all of these systems are going to work together and complement each other and work in conjunction to bring success overall. So one of the elements that J.D. Power has been focusing on with our research is looking at the centrality of the ecosystem regarding automation keeps coming back to this underlying factor of trust. So when we do talk about the consumer and whether they are willing to ride in a vehicle, whether they are willing to purchase an automated vehicle, it really starts with this concept of what is their level of trust first. And so that becomes central to the ecosystem, looking at the ways that we are communicating, what is this automated vehicle about? How does it operate? What is its capability? Certainly, what is the role of the driver? That type of communication builds and grows the level of trust. But working our way through that ecosystem, you can see on the right side of, or on what would be the left side of that chart, is looking at the liability framework. J.D. Power recently did some research with Miller Canfield that looked at what happens if your automated vehicle gets into an accident. How would you want to resolve that dispute? And looks at the current court system, looks at the current resolution process, and understands if there are opportunities there from a consumer point of view, as well as the plaintiff and defense counsel point of view. So I do have actually some white papers here available from that research that we have done. It's also available online if you'd like to look at that. But we see that that is going to be a critical portion of this ecosystem as well, right? This is real life. And then finally, one of the other elements that we see where trust is at the heart of this ecosystem is setting up safety standards. This is that third-party qualification that essentially gives the consumers, the users, the other people interacting, even as a non-vehicle passenger, sets up the confidence that these vehicles are roadworthy in a way that is non-biased. And so we see this as central to this ecosystem, central to building trust going forward. So that's our brief introduction. I'm going to now turn it over to Rebecca. So to introduce Rebecca more formally, Rebecca is a Senior Vice President of Automotive Coatings at PPG. She is the global leader for PPG's Automotive OEM Coatings Strategic Business Unit and joined PPG in June of 2018. So prior to joining PPG, she served as President and CEO of Honeywell UOP. She has a Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering and a PhD in Chemical Engineering from Carnegie Mellon and an MBA from Kellogg School of Management. So welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you. Well, it's a pleasure to be here today to talk about the future of mobility and how we look at it beyond the automobile. So PPG has been protecting and beautifying the world's vehicles for almost 100 years. And typically folks are expecting from a coatings company to provide a vehicle that can be effective in harsh environments, whether it's high salt or other types of damages, and withstand that. Also, everyone wants their vehicle to look great for as long as possible. So you're looking at the aesthetics and the color and maintaining that color over the life of the vehicle and harmonizing all the parts around it. But as we think to the future of what is going to be required from a coatings company, you think more about how you're going to reflect LiDAR, sometimes transmit radars, and also make sure that surfaces that need to be clean and interface signal free have the right coatings to allow that to happen. And so we're developing coatings that can maintain and operate in a higher efficient manner in these types of environments and needs. But it doesn't stop with the car. If you think about the future of mobility, you're going to need to make sure your coatings are functional on the roads, on the signs, and on certain connective and identification structures. So we're looking at how we're going to talk between the car and your surroundings. And coatings, functional coatings, can really enable that communication by adding sensors and taggants and other types of communication vehicles into the coatings, as well as ensure, again, that those coatings are transmitted in the proper manner. Now, when I think about the future of mobility, I have a vision. I think about Meet George Jetson, also about Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica. I was a sci-fi junkie. So nobody knows what it's really going to look like, but I think what we do know is the coatings that are going to be needed are going to be very different. They're going to have to reflect and enable light weighting, enable a much more cleanly environment, and in some cases, you're going to want very high-end coatings and high-end environments, and in other cases, you'll have more generic or more standard environments. So, PPG looks forward to enabling this future of mobility, both in the car and outside the car.
Thank you, Rebecca. Next up, we have Ray Tang. So Ray is the founder and CEO for Zhongmu. Zhongmu is a leading ADAS and autonomous driving supplier focused on low speed and parking scenarios and has won various automated valet parking programs from leading Chinese OEMs. So welcome.
Okay, thank you, Christine. It's a pleasure to here present Zhongmu and tell a little bit more on autonomous driving, our strategy about the things in China, how we do this kind of level 4 kind of valet parking program. So basically, Zhongmu is a startup in China. We are 6 years old. We started at January 2013, and right now we have become an established new the ADAS and autonomous driving technology suppliers to the leading Chinese OEMs. We have shipped over 5,000 units for level 0 technologies a few years back. Right now we are looking to push level 2 ADAS functions like automatic parking assist starting our production this year. But more excitingly, I think that we are looking to working with some of the leading Chinese OEMs in pushing level 4 technology. We call it automatic valet parking programs into mass production in about 2 years frame. So our customers including Chang'an Auto, FAW First Auto, Geely, GAIC. We actually do have a booth here around the corner showing a fleet of vehicles from Chang'an equipped with this level 4 automatic valet parking systems being controlled remotely from the room here. So we are very excited to present our strategy and also our thought about autonomous driving. So basically, what we have built for the industry is a system that including a central unit, a brain that does very advanced parking technology, like valet parking, automatic valet parking, surrounded with a set of sensors, including cameras, the 4 fisheye surrounding cameras, 1 front view cameras, and also sensors like radar and ultrasonic, and of course some of the sensors from the vehicle body as well. So with this system, we are enabling a scenario that can allow you to do basically the autonomous driving in one last kilometer, that you can have the vehicle to drop you in front of a place, let's say in front of an elevator in the shopping mall, or in front of your office building, industry park, and then you just go do your things, and then the vehicle will park itself. And after you have finished your work of the day, or you have just watched a movie, you just take off your cell phone to summon the car to pick you up in a specified spot. So this kind of last 1 kilometer level 4 autonomous driving technology, we are very excited to work with some of the Chinese OEMs in pushing them into mass production in about 2 years time frame. And we believe that this exciting technology does not only to enable the with the OEMs with the traditional supplier base that as a part to the vehicle, but also I think that we are working very actively along with the OEMs and also some of the shared mobility platform operators in turning in this ecosystem so that it really transforms the way we move, the way we do transport. So we are seeing that this kind of new level 4 technology is very exciting in a way that it actually not only is traditional supplier model to the OEM, but also an enabler for a new way that people do transport. So think about this. For an end consumer, you just in the future, there's a bunch of vehicles with this kind of level 4 technology. You can just use your cell phone to summon a car in a parking lot, and the car will come to you instead of you spend time to find the car in the garage. And then you get on the car. If eventually the robot taxi technology is fully mature, of course the car can drive itself. But in the meantime, you can also drive the car on the road by yourselves. And then at your destination, you don't bother to park your car. The car will park itself. And also the shared mobility operator will, at the background, will also use this kind of technology to maintain the car, to maneuver the car to a place so the car can charge itself, or also basically to improve their operation efficiency as well. So we are seeing that this AVP application is also a key or a core technology enabler for all this kind of scenarios. So this is all about from our side. Yeah. Thank you.
Fantastic. Very interesting. Thank you. All right. Next up, we have Israel Duanis, and Israel is co-founder and CEO of Fleetonomy. He is an autonomous vehicle veteran and data-driven technologist who utilizes his passion for innovation to lead Fleetonomy's journey towards the autonomous revolution. By using Fleetonomy's mobility as a service platforms, top-tier OEMs, rental service, and transit agencies, as well as other mobility operators, are already launching their new mobility services in order to utilize today's opportunities and prepare themselves for the future ahead. Welcome.
So thank you, Christy. My name is Israel. Happy to share what we see today through our customers when it comes to mobility as a service platforms while focusing on the fleet management of things. So a bit about my background. I started my journey in the autonomous field back in 2004, taking part in the DARPA challenge with a team that got to the second place. That was pretty cool, but we focused mostly on the challenges of one autonomous vehicle. Then I moved to a division who had to do with multiple assets and managing a lot of assets of fleets, and we've seen that the challenges are quite different. And that would brought my co-founder and myself to found Fleetonomy because we brought our experience in managing multiple assets, but bringing also our love to autonomous vehicles. And when you think about autonomous at scale, so we first need to think how fleets operate today. So we heavily rely on the drivers or dispatchers. That means that we rely on the know-how and best practices of the drivers. And once you try to take them out of the loop, and that might happen eventually, so you need to somehow orchestrate that fleet. How do you know where to send the vehicle each and every second of the day? Where is the demand areas? When do you need to maintain the vehicles? And a lot of things must be solutions that you don't have today. But another interesting aspect is what will be the services on top of these fleets. So we start to see today mobility as a services, but they will change. And when we see what happens today, we are focusing on 4 areas that we believe that are important when you move along through these fleets of autonomous vehicles. So first of all, automation. But when we think about automation, it's not only about automating the vehicle or even automating the fleet. Think about automating the fleet-based service, the company. Think about all of the manual things that are happening today, from logging, dispatching, cleaning the vehicle. That needs to be handled. and it's not easy. But in order to take these kind of actions, you must have data-driven technologies. You need to train machine learning engines to do these decisions that today people are taking. Another interesting aspect is us as customers. So at the end of the day, as we see the future, and we see it already today, we will be less dependent on what brand we're taking. You can order an Uber today. We don't really care what kind of vehicle comes as long as it's a certain class. And fleet operators know that. And in the future, they will need to give us an experience, not only a vehicle. What kind of vehicle do we want for transport or to commute or for delivery? And that's a big challenge. Now, the other side of the equation is the fleet itself. As we'll go and see fleets going 24/7, utilization, which is already today a big issue, will become an even more crucial one. And we believe that fleets that will be able to operate multiple services on top of one fleet will be able to reach utilization that is needed in order to create profitability in this space. And the way we see it today is, yes, companies today need to start taking action because building this IP and educating the market takes time. But it's not only starting operating these services today in order to be ready for the future. We see with our customers today that providing these kind of technologies already today gives them value. Because as long as they are able to automate more and more processes, that reduces costs in their day-to-day. Data-driven technologies will help them take better actions in day-to-day, and personalization will help us as customers to get a better experience. So if you'd like to hear more about how exactly that it is that we do that, come to our booth at TS26. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next we have Dr. Sheila Cotton. So Sheila is a sociologist and is a Michigan State Foundation professor in the Department of Media and Information. She studies technology across the life course and the impacts of technology use on health, quality of life, the workforce, and education. Her recent work has focused on how groups across the life course perceive automated vehicles in terms of risks, benefits, and willingness to use. She recently completed a study in conjunction with the American Center for Mobility focusing on preparing the workforce for automated vehicles. Welcome, Sheila.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here today. And this is my second year at the auto show. Last year was my first. So I live in Okemos, Michigan, which is about an hour and a half from here. And last year, when I was driving here, the weather looked more like this outside. Now, you may have picked up on my accent. I'm not from Michigan. I'm from the South, and say y'all. We're not used to weather like this. I've been in Michigan for about 5 years, and I don't like driving in general, but I really don't like driving when the weather is icy and the roads are horrible, and I'm going to Detroit where I don't drive all that often. Now, last year, when I was driving in this horrible snow and ice storm, my windshield fluid gave out about halfway here. My windshield was completely covered. You couldn't see anything. I'm driving, and I'm having to let down my window so that I could even see what the road was in front of me. I finally get off the road and find some gas station and, fill it with fluid and then make my merry way here. But the point of this story is that my stress levels went through the roof when that happened last year. Now, would it have been much better if there was an autonomous vehicle that could have driven me to the auto show last year? And I didn't feel my blood pressure rising quite considerably during that drive. So as Kristen said, I'm a sociologist, and I study how people use technology and how we can help people cross the digital divide to have technology positively impact their lives. I focus across the life course from the very young to the very old. Everything from those smartphones that many of you have out in front of you to smart homes, to autonomous vehicles, and how are they impacting our health, our quality of life, our workforce, and educational outcomes. So as Kristen said, we recently finished a report. Hopefully some of you have read it. If not, the URL is here on the screen, and there's also executive summaries back at the MSU booth that you can pick up today. But we talked to industry experts around the country about automated vehicles and the projected course over the next decade. And one of the things that we found is that the uptake is going to be pretty low over the next decade, and the number of jobs that are going to be shifting is not going to be quite as dramatic, at least for trucking, as some have suggested. Happy to chat with any of you at the end about this to give you more details on our methodology and our results. So in addition to the research that I do, which, as I said, focuses on groups across the life course, and a lot of my work is with older adults and how autonomous vehicles could benefit them, I also lead a group at Michigan State called the Socio-Mobility Group. And this is a group that is comprised of faculty and students across the university who are focused on understanding the impacts of mobility on a range of different outcomes. So you can see up here the range of different disciplines we have represented and focusing on the social, behavioral, communication, economic, legal aspects of mobility and autonomous vehicles in particular. This is a range of some of the different things that people are working on at MSU right now. As you can see, everything from how do we help individuals with disabilities to be successful users of AVs, and to help companies think about what are some of the challenges with people that have different types of limitations in health and well-being. MSU is offering one of the first courses this year on legal impacts of autonomous vehicles. We've got people looking at impacts on the local communities, the state, the economics, a range of different topics here. So what's next in terms of socio-mobility? We're only in the early stages of really understanding any of the impacts of this emerging technology on people's lives. It really takes an interdisciplinary group of people who can try to come together to look at the multifaceted impacts on society. There's not going to be one answer to solving so many of the problems that are arising. If we think about workforce impacts, we definitely need to dig deeper into particular skills and the types of jobs that are going to be created. Many of these jobs are emerging, and so being able to identify the skills that are needed is really a challenge at this point in time. And so I think there's a lot of potential for understanding health and stress and quality of life impacts with mobility and with autonomous vehicles in particular. And hopefully we'll all contribute to understanding that and helping people to really have a better perception of the realities of autonomous vehicles and understanding the different levels and what it means to be in a car that has fully autonomous versus a level 2 or level 1. Because right now, a lot of my research is showing that people don't have a clear understanding of the different levels. So there's lots of different ways that we can work together to really try to better understand the impacts moving forward. So if you want connections with any of our socio-mobility group or to hear more about my work, just feel free to reach out to me, and I'll be at the MSU booth for a good while today. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, everyone. So lots of very good information, and hopefully you guys are feeling the level of diversity as well as, all of the questions that still remain out there. So why don't we start on just trying to gauge a bit of the ends of the spectrum, right? So let's start with what are we most excited about, thinking about this automation, again, beyond the vehicle. We focused quite a bit on the vehicle itself. So thinking beyond the vehicle, what are you guys most excited about with the potential? Again, we're forecasting where this is going to go.
I'm really excited about the potential impacts on stress and health and quality of life. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not a real fan of driving, particularly long distances. It's a waste of time. I would much rather be sitting there sleeping or reading or doing work. So thinking about the ways that autonomous vehicles can improve people's quality of life, I think I'm really excited about and thinking about that potential.
Ma'am, I love to drive. I just thought I'd note that.
My husband does too.
It is very relieving. It is completely stress-free. I'm into it. It's a big deal. Anyway, I don't mean to be obstructionist or anything, but I just thought I'd throw that in.
My husband loves it too.
But I think that's one of the
And
elements.
it's a very good way to relieve stress. Thank you.
I think this is one of the areas that is probably, falling back on industry to be able to help clear up what is automation and what is it not, right? Do we have the option to be able to drive, or is it always an on type of situation? And so for gentlemen like, that share that opinion that I want to drive and sometimes I might not, right? What can we do to be able to clearly communicate to these consumers as we're talking about what this potential is? Will they have the opportunity to drive? So, all right, anyone else?
Yeah, so when I think about what excites us, and it's also as a technological company, but also as a consumer. So first, managing autonomous fleets is something that you need to somehow train machines to do things that today people are doing with a lot of experience, and they will be happening step by step. But it's something that, on the technological perspective, there's still a lot that has to do, and I'm very excited to see how that turns out. The second layer is how will we consume that service, and that also comes to what are the challenges that I think that we see in the coming years, because if you look a few years ago, so everybody were talking about mobility as a service and something that will be amazing and we'll consume it and get from A to B and finance is okay. But then all of a sudden, the market today is talking about weight. We've gone through pilots, we've seen a lot of financing in that market. Is it really profitable? Can we maintain services which will be beneficial to the companies, to the customers? And I believe in the coming years, that is something that we'll be seeing when it comes to at least our customers, focusing on the areas of making these kind of services efficient, to optimize the utilization, and at the same time to make sure that us as customers, we're still enjoying a good ride. I think that will be the way I see it in the coming years.
Yeah, I mean, to add to the sort of technical innovation piece of it, I think for a coatings company, to see how the coatings are going to change the way we invest in infrastructure and the way roads and infrastructure are even built. I mean, we have stoplights today. Are we going to need stoplights in the future? If everything's autonomous and you know where those cars are going from and to, and they can talk to each other, there may be no need for stoplights. And it may change exactly how we build roads and design roads, and civil engineers may have to think about everything they do differently. So I think sort of some of the platforms that are going to be established in the nearer term, the standardization, are going to help us drive towards that. But I can see a world where the way the roads and the infrastructure are built are very, very different.
And I want to add a few to the when should we expect the full autonomous driving to liberate the driver at all in doing the driving task. I think there surely will be scenarios that is needed by elders, by senior people, by handicapped people that they can't drive or they don't enjoy drive at all. But I think that another way to look at it is even this full autonomous driving technically or legally is far, far away. Even Waymo admitted that it's too long ago. But in the meantime, I think that we should think to really have those people keep the driving pleasure when they can enjoy it, but then to really help them to liberate them from those scenarios or situations that they don't feel the pleasure of driving at all. For example, if you are, for example, parking, that's one of the scenarios we are focusing. Even you have a cool sports car, you probably want to do valet parking. Can we, automate that by this kind of technology we are doing? Or if you are, jammed up in a traffic jam, can we then library yourself so that to do this, we call it traffic jam pilot, so that the car can basically drive by itself instead of having you drive it very painfully. So we believe that the full autonomous driving is still far, far away. But in the meantime, we should aim to design or develop autonomous driving technologies can really save you from those painful experiences of when you are doing driving.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think as Sheila phrased it, that quality of life. So absolutely. So now let's bound our spectrum and talk about what is the part of the ecosystem that really has not gotten enough attention. Right? Maybe said another way, what are the challenges that we have for this ecosystem beyond the vehicle itself?
I think the standards have to be set. Governments and regulators and industry groups all have to get together and figure out what that protocol is going to be. Vehicle-to-vehicle protocol, vehicle-to-infrastructure protocol. because unless we have that, it's not going to be successful, right? It'd be like 4G. If everybody didn't have the same 4G platform, none of us could talk to each other on their cell phones. The same with electric transmission or gas pipeline transmission. All these protocols have to get set. And I think that's, somehow it's got to have the right focus and the right come together to make that happen.
So maybe just to further your point, is that within the United States only? Is this global? What degree are you looking for that to happen?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I guess at least regionally, I would think, because cars will go, across the border to Canada or into Mexico. At least I think we have to get some of that going. It would be great if it could be global, because then it would be beneficial to those that are operating in the space, so that they could, have one standard and one group of development programs and things like that. So, but I don't know, maybe some of my colleagues have some further insight. I think global would certainly be the best for the industry.
Yeah, so I can say that when we look at the global spread of how do countries or states relate to these kind of pilots today, so that has a big impact on when that kind of country will understand how to go full autonomous. Because when we look at Europe or back home in Israel or in the US, so different countries might say, we don't want to start yet, because of lobbies, because of regulations. And the thing is that when you look at the countries that say yes, so it's not only that they now start dealing with also infrastructure and how their citizens are using these services, they're also bringing back into their countries good people to work on that, tech. So I think as we move along, I think more and more countries will understand that they need to stop pushing back, and it's not easy, right? Because there's a lot of pressure from a lot of sides. But we do see this change throughout the world. Some areas will be much more, they will stop that, and some will just be free to go on pilot, and then eventually also have better chances to be ready when that comes.
I think both the related challenges that they've talked about have to do with communication and the interaction of organizations at multiple levels. Societies are complex, countries are complex, communities are complex, and without having good understanding and mutual respect for each other, I think it becomes challenging at times to think about doing this on a global level. I'd love for it to be able to be done in the United States and Canada and Mexico and around the world, but until we have better communication about the importance and the value that we place on autonomy and autonomous vehicles, I think it's going to be challenging.
Yeah.
So when we were talking a bit about data earlier. Several of the presentations earlier this morning were talking about the value of data and certainly what happens if that data is compromised. I think one of Israel actually had used the phrase, data is the new oil, right? And this really seems to be the next target focus on potential monetization. So talk about data, and again, in this context of beyond the vehicle, what does this world of data look like?
So when we look at automation, and not about only the vehicle itself, but about fleets or mobility services. So as I mentioned before, we need to start replacing manual processes that are being done today. Now, manual means that some person is sitting and deciding about what should happen with the service. And deciding means that he or she knows what happens in the city, and they can think about what's the correlation between weather and traffic and social events and strikes. But if you take the human being out of the loop, you need some sort of decision-making technology that will make the decisions. And you cannot have a good decision-making without having all the data in front of you. So today we see, I'm very optimistic because you see more and more data that is available about almost everything. So it still needs to be formalized. Security is a big issue about that. GDPR back in Europe, and every country has its own angle on that. So yes, we need to do that slowly and to make sure that data is being still secured. But if we want to train on automatic decision making, and it's not only when it comes to autonomy in vehicle, it's also in every industry. So the more data you have, the better decision you will be able to take. And that is really crucial because that will differentiate between a fleet going randomly, right, and a fleet that is at the end of the day efficient, going to demand areas, going in the right time to maintenance, knowing more about us as customers and giving the right vehicle for each and every customer. So I think it's crucial, but the good news is that I feel the industry already understands that. So you can see OEMs and car rental companies and fleet operators, they already understand that's a need. But yeah, it is the new oil, of course.
I can see, of course, the cloud knows so much about us already right now because of our cell phones and our buying behaviors and things like that. But when our cars are fully connected, and they're going to know where we are every moment of every day, and some people may not like that, but I think it will also give a lot of opportunity for, again, changing how we structure the roads and the infrastructure. It can eliminate traffic jams. It can make sure that that we're putting the infrastructure dollars on the right roads, because those are the roads that are being used more, or the bridges, or the other things. So I think it can really enable, I guess this is work to some extent that's done by other people today, but really help us drive and hone where we're going to put our resources in the future.
So as we sit here in January, many of us are doing our goals and looking at, what does this year ahead hold for us? What are the key things that you guys are looking at, from a trend perspective regarding mobility, automation for 2019? What are you guys keeping track of?
So I can say in our area, it comes back to what I said before about we see a change in the market. In the past few years, you would see a lot of budgets going on pilots and trying to prove that maybe putting money into market education. Like today, sure, mobility as a service is not a question. I consume it every day. But there's a shift from, okay, let's pilot it, to let's look at this as a business, moving from innovation departments to business units. And when that happens, the focus is on bottom lines, revenue, profit, utilization. And I think, you've been reading the news, we see all sort of sometimes struggles when it comes to mobility as a service companies. And we do want everyone to succeed, but we need to put effort when it comes to bottom line, utilization. And I think that in 2019, that will be a big effort. We see our customers talking exactly about that. That's what we're focusing on with our platform. That's the way we look at 2019.
Great.
Okay. And on our side, and I think that for the past few years, autonomous driving has been really the most hot topic in the overall IT or high-tech industry. So there are a lot of hypes or very high expectations that when will this come into large quantity, and there's a race among the big giants and also startups for the past 2 years, even 3-4 years. But I think that starting this year, people are becoming, it's kind of oscillating between very high expectation. It seems that overnight there will be raw taxi everywhere, led by Waymo or Cruise GM, or some very pessimistic views that it won't be there. Maybe 10, 20 years for the full L5 or highway L4 technologies to be in large quantity. I think there's kind of oscillation, but starting this year, it's kind of converging to a, within the industry, that which are the first mass production capable system or scenarios on high level automated vehicle. So that is happening. I think that among OEMs and tier ones, that reaching, converge to some conclusions that what is more practical or durable in a more predictable way. And we believe that automated valet parking is one of the leading product or scenario that now being recognized by some of the biggest OEM and worldwide.
We're doing some work building off our American Center for Mobility Workforce Report, really honing in on some of the specific skills that are going to be needed as the workforce transitions over the next decade. And so partnering with different industries and organizations around the United States in particular to better understand those potential skills that are going to need it, and how we can better educate students of today and the students that are coming down the pipeline.
Excellent. Well, why don't we see any questions that you have from the audience? Yes. I'll repeat these so that everyone can hear. It doesn't.
Sheila talked about stuck on the highway windshield and see out. So take the hypothetical of a disabled individual driving this vehicle on that highway where the automated sensors are coming with ice. Can't get out of the vehicle. Feel that issue. Much worse than the anxiety.
Yes.
That's one question. Second question. Israel's optimism about resistors eventually giving way to enablers. And concern I have is much of the world is only beginning to scrape the surface of the basic needs. We talk about incredibly energy-intensive technology and costly technology as something that's appropriate for both. I have severe misgivings about it here in the United States. The idea of foisting this on developed nations, I think, is
Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to take them one at a time here just to make sure that we can progress through. So the first question was relating back to Sheila's example of driving to the auto show, except he would like to take the scenario to a person that is disabled in driving in an automated vehicle, and now the sensors are in that snowstorm, and they are now blocked by that situation. And that person is not able to essentially exit the vehicle and clear the sensors of that situation. So maybe describe that scenario if you would.
Sure. So I think that the technology is going to have to get better so that the snow comes off it somehow, or the ice comes off it. I'm not an engineer, so I have no clue how that will actually take place. Hopefully some of my colleagues on the panel do. But it's a challenge, and there have to be communication systems for the person within the vehicle, but also some external organization that can sense when challenges like that are occurring and can intervene. Because can you imagine sitting on the side of a road and your car will not move and you're in a wheelchair and you can't get out, and maybe you're not able to even speak or communicate? People can die. And so thinking about how to make these vehicles safer and to ensure that there are not these challenges that occur, and if they do occur, that there are backup plans to solve those problems.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to hit on that. I think, as a coatings provider, our goal would be to develop coatings that ensure that that never happens. But number two, I think we should always have redundancy plans to cover in case there was ever a breakdown, whether it's the coating didn't work, which we would never want to happen, or the sensor doesn't work. So we're going to require that. And I think that's where it comes down to what are these standards and protocols, and what's the government going to require in redundancy, right? If you're in banking, you have to have triple backup of the data. That's a requirement post 9/11. So what is going to be the requirement that's going to be out there for autonomous vehicles relative to redundancy systems?
Thank you. And just the other question that was asked was regarding the optimism of essentially giving way in that this future of automation is coming through. The gentleman's point was, from a global perspective, many of these countries are just getting to basic mobility levels. So how realistic is it when you're thinking about cost of automation and the energy levels with automation to be able to get to this widespread global, incorporation?
So I mentioned the word optimistic. I agree. That's me. But I spoke about the data play. I think when you look at the whole ecosystem, there are still a lot of challenges that have to do with labor, regulations. Will it work in the last percent of the obstacles that a vehicle needs to go through? But regardless if this is going to happen in 10 years, 20 or 30, I think being optimistic means that let's take the parts that we know that are working already and start creating value today. So if we believe that there are different ways we can commute or can get deliveries or logistics, we don't need to wait until everything will be autonomous. If we can get better as customers, better services, because the operators will know a bit more about us and give us something that is personalized according to security and everything, so we can enjoy it today. If the fleet operators will focus on utilization and efficiency, we'll get faster to work or to any activity. So I think Being only optimistic is bad, although entrepreneurs they tend to be optimistic. But I think we need to look at the market and say, look, this will take time, this is difficult, and I think today the market already understands that there are a few areas in which that will take more time than we thought. But I think being optimistic means let's create value today with what we already achieved. And that is at least our view on the market.
And I'd just like to add, you know, we went the linear way, I guess, in the U.S. relative to phones, right? We had party lines, and then we had landlines that went individual homes, and then we got multiple lines in every home, and then we went to cell phones. But you know, India went basically straight to cell phones and straight to 4G cell phones. And now Amazon is delivering packages in the remote outskirts of India because people have a cell phone with 4G and they can order on Amazon. And Amazon's dropping them at a drop center, you know, maybe one drop center for a 20-mile radius, and people are taking them out to these homes on bicycles, and they don't even have an address. It's like, you know, go to the big tree and turn left. And now Amazon is using those phones to have all those bicycle carriers mark that spot and give it a coordinate and an address. So I'm not saying that going to 4G is the same as building an autonomous highway or network, but I mean, you can envision that they may just totally pass over the linear approach of stoplights and stop signs and just go to an autonomous network. It could happen. And I think we shouldn't limit ourselves because of that, because that could save them a heck of a lot of infrastructure money if they just make that leap, just like it saved them a lot of money not putting landlines and all of the cables for landlines. So the future is up to us, I think.
Well said, well said. Well, we are unfortunately at time. I hope you have an appreciation that this is a very complex puzzle to solve. We've got numerous experts that are out there looking at each of these portions of the equation, but really the more that we can keep this fact in front of us that to set ourselves up for success, we have to make sure that we're considering all of these aspects collectively together. It's not just the technology of the vehicle itself that is going to create automation for success. We need to consider the infrastructure, the work-life balance, the quality of life, the driver, the pedestrians, and on, and the global implications. I mean, and it's a very big list. Daunting, but we have extremely smart people here to be able to solve that problem. So thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time, and thank you very much to the panelists.
Thank you.